6, there is a statement that says the sons of God, which generally refers to the angels, saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives of them, and they had children by them. And it says that, in the King James particularly, it says the same were giants. And they bore giants, and that some of them were killed off during the flood, but that they were on the earth in those days and afterward. The fact that there were people of great height has been supported by what Joshua's spies discovered, and what actually the 12 spies discovered when Moses sent them into the land. You remember what they said? We were like grasshoppers in our own sight. Remember that? That meant that this people in the land were huge. And when you read about this over in Joshua, you'll find that Joshua wiped out a bunch of them. They might have been big, but that didn't mean they were invincible. And they had been in Hebron and a couple of other places. And at that time in Joshua, they were able to get them out of the land of Israel, and they confined themselves to the land of the Philistines. And one of the cities that they went to was, or that they were still in, was the city of Gath. And so it's from this group that we have Goliath. Now we find in other places in Scripture that Goliath had brothers. And some commentators feel like there were as many as 4 other brothers. And so that'll come into play in just a couple of minutes. You'll understand some things there. Now as you read about this guy, he was pretty invincible. It was a pretty huge problem that they're presented with. He has this bronze helmet on his head, and he has a coat of scale armor. The Philistines were a sea people. They lived along the seacoast, did a lot of fishing, and it's thought that this armor that he had was something that kind of imitated the scales of a fish. That they had sewn these bronze pieces where they overlapped like the scales of a fish did, so they could protect them during battle. And so this guy, now he's got, and this whole armor that he wore, it says 5,000 shekels is what it weighed. That doesn't mean anything to us. I mean, how many of you know how many shekels you weigh? I don't. Somewhere between 125 and 155 pounds. Like, can you imagine wearing something that weighed 150 pounds? Our guys that are in the military have to put these packs on their back, and they have to learn to hike and do all kinds of stuff. And they might be, I don't think they're quite 150 pounds. You'd have to really have some endurance. This guy was huge. And it covers his legs. He's got a javelin, and his spear shaft is like a weaver's rod, and the point weighed 600 shekels. That's about 15 pounds. That's just the thing he holds, a spear. Any of you ever do shot put when you were younger? Those big, heavy, like 10 and 12 pound balls, and you try to throw them as far as you can, They might weigh 10 or 12 pounds. This was 15 pounds, and it was on his spear that he wanted for kind of distance battle. He has a shield bearer who's going in front of him, and he stands and shouts to the ranks of Israel. Now, I found this fascinating. You can read what they've got there, but I want to read you what we call the Targum, which is kind of like a Jewish commentary. The Jews did a lot of writing about their own scriptures, and where'd it go? There it is. I came across this today, and it really makes sense that he might have said something like this. Let's see, where is it? Okay, I am Goliath, the Philistine of Gath, who killed the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests, and led into captivity the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, and placed it in the temple of Dagon, my God. And it remained in the cities of the Philistines 7 months. Also in all our battles, I've gone at the head of the army. And we conquered and cut down men and laid them as low as the dust of the earth. And to this day, the Philistines have not granted me the honor of being chief of 1,000 men. And you men of Israel, what noble exploit has Saul, the son of Kish of Gibeah, done, that you should make him king over you? If he be a hero, let him come down himself and fight with me. But if he be a weak or cowardly man, then choose you out a man that he may come down to me. And that speech was what Adam Clark had in his commentary. While this is a big problem, this huge guy is there, and he's taunting the people of Israel. Well, let's back up a little bit, because we brought somebody into the picture who the rest of the narrative is going to be focused on him. We don't know how long passes between the end of chapter 16 and the beginning of chapter 17. It really doesn't tell us how long, because the focus, once the Spirit of God left Saul and came upon David, the storyteller is only concerned now about the story of David. He's not trying to give us an account of the time when Saul was king. He's focusing on David. And so we saw David as he was moving into position where God wanted him to be. And so now he's had the ability to begin to rub shoulders with some of the most important people in the kingdom. And so David has now gone back home, and when chapter 17 begins, David is back home with his parents. And the lapse could have been 3 to 5 years. How many of you have ever seen a young person when they were young, then you didn't see them for 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years, and then you see them again? Are they easy to recognize? Not necessarily. Keep that in mind, because it's going to help explain some things that we get into in just a little bit. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out to you was David's been in the service of Saul, and Saul's a bad king, okay? The Spirit of God has left him. He's not going to be passing the kingdom on to any of his sons at all. And David's in this situation, and God placed him there for a reason. And that tells me that there are times in our lives when we're going to be put in a situation where we may not have a good example to learn from. We may have to kind of learn in reverse. Does that make sense to you? You look at something and you say, you know what? That's not right. I wouldn't do it that way. I think they should. And you begin to formulate some opinions. Kids, when they grow up in a dysfunctional home, have one of two reactions. One reaction is that they grow up and begin to imitate that dysfunctional home in their own homes without even realizing what's going on. There are other situations, however, when a child grows up in a home that's very dysfunctional, and they are very well aware of that, and they are saying to themselves, I will never parent my children like my parents parented me. I will never do this. I will never. They're learning in reverse. Some time ago, I was privileged to serve as an assistant principal of the school, and I won't mention where it was just because I don't know how far this video will go, and I don't want it to reflect badly on somebody. But I had a boss who treated kids differently than what I felt like they should be treated. I had a boss who would verbally rake a kid over the coals, yelling at them very loudly in front of other people. And I made up my mind when I was serving under this individual that I would never do that. I learned in reverse. When I would walk into his office, and I kid you not, the stack on top of his desk was literally this thick. And it went across the desk. And I vowed that if I were in his position somewhere in the future, my desk would be clean. Because I can't tolerate it. I learned in reverse. And so David is now in a situation where he has the opportunity to observe from, a young person's standpoint. And you do know, don't you, that for young people there are no gray areas. It's all black and white. You ever notice that? You're okay with something, and they're like, no. It's like Steve the other day. He said, so they took your your lymph nodes out for no reason, huh? It's all black and white with them. And so David is able to observe, and I think David was learning in reverse. I think he was learning in opposite, if you will. And then I think it's also important for us to see that, David was anointed to be king. Okay? The Spirit of God had come powerfully upon him, and yet, when he's asked to come to the current king and simply play his music, what does he do? He goes and he plays his music. And so I think we need to understand that it's important to minister to other people in small ways, even if we don't feel like that's the end goal of our life. David could have been like, go and play music? Don't you understand? I'm going to be the king. Why should I play music for him? I mean, he's going out anyway. God's not with him anymore. God's with me. I'm not going to play music for him. But David didn't do that. David went. David never said a word. Now, maybe he was afraid for his life. I don't know. I don't know that Saul's killed anybody up to this point except Philistines. He almost got Jonathan killed, but he didn't. So I encourage you to minister to other people in little ways, insignificant ways, even if you don't feel like that's the end goal of your life. And as we begin to look at this situation that the Israelites are confronted with, it's a nearly impossible situation. They've got this champion who seems undefeatable. He's got almost every part of his body covered with brass. He's been calling out for 40 days, "Send me a man to fight. If he wins, we'll serve you, but if we win, you'll serve us." Now, he really didn't have any authority from either Israel to make that challenge or from the Philistines. He was just running off at the mouth. It was quite common for them to choose champions like this in that day and time. And there